Joran Kale's workshop dominated an entire section of the orbital station known as Bastion Forge. The industrial district was noisy and cluttered, but Joran's corner stood apart: clean lines, efficient organization, machines calibrated to within microns. Fabrication arrays that could work almost any material, diagnostic rigs able to interface with hardware from half the known civilizations. Joran thrived here, lost in the rhythm of engineering puzzles and quiet problem-solving. That rhythm shattered the instant a vessel cut across the station's traffic grid and slipped into a private berth just outside his viewport. The ship was small but carried the kind of presence that made him stop mid-calibration. Its hull gleamed with matte black plating designed to absorb scans, and it maneuvered with precision that screamed military systems. Expensive. Dangerous. Out of place. The comm system chirped, voice distorted through heavy electronic filters. Bastion Forge Repair Facility. Independent contractor request. Are you available for immediate consultation? Joran straightened, suspicion sparking. The modulation hid gender, species, identity, someone determined to remain a ghost. He'd seen his share of secretive clients, but this one radiated intent. Joran Kale, chief engineer, he answered. What services are we talking about? Advanced combat systems repair. Extensive damage to power armor, weapon platforms, and life support systems. Premium compensation for discretion and speed. That got his attention. Combat systems were his specialty. Premium rates meant upgrades to his shop, maybe even the crystalline processor he'd been eyeing for months. You'll need to bring the hardware in for assessment, Joran said. Private Base 7 is clear. 20 minutes later, the air in his workshop shifted as the door hissed open. The figure who entered was almost 7 feet tall, encased in armor that blended design philosophies no single species should have been able to unify. Ultra-ion energy shielding, Terran servomotors, Zephyrian biomechanical interfaces. Each by itself represented bleeding-edge tech. Together, they were nearly impossible. But the suit was scarred. Plasma burns etched across the chest plate. Actuator housings dented from kinetic impacts. The sensor array across the helmet half shattered. Whoever wore this had been through a storm of fire recently. Impressive hardware, Joran murmured, circling. His scanner hummed to life, flooding the armor with diagnostic pulses. Custom build. Extensively modified, the filtered voice replied. Full restoration required. Is that a problem? Joran almost laughed. No. It's fascinating. But I'll need you to remain on station. Neural interface calibrations require live feedback. A pause. Then, acceptable. Private quarters. Minimal interaction with personnel. That can be arranged. As negotiations concluded, curiosity gnawed at Joran. The armor alone suggested access to the highest levels of military research. The client's phrasing, careful, never personal, hinted at someone trained to reveal nothing. But clients who paid for secrecy earned secrecy. Questions could wait. Any performance modifications? Joran asked, prepping his workstation. I'm interested in your ideas. Operational effectiveness is priority. For the first time, he caught a note that wasn't strictly transactional. Engagement. Whoever was inside that armor cared about more than survival, they cared about excellence. Joran smiled faintly, fingers flying across the console. Then let's see what this beast of a suit can really do. By day's end, the workshop buzzed with data streams and recalibration subroutines. Joran's scanners painted a picture both thrilling and terrifying: energy cores using forbidden crystalline storage, biomechanical channels responsive to neural feedback at speeds most humans couldn't survive, defensive fields one tweak away from becoming offensive shockwaves. The figure, still unnamed, still masked, watched in silence. Occasionally they asked questions sharp enough to cut through layers of jargon, questions that revealed combat experience fused with real technical understanding. And Joran realized something. This was no ordinary mercenary wandering in from the edge of law. Whoever they were, they carried the weight of countless battles, and secrets worth dying to protect. As Bastion Forge dimmed into simulated night, Joran powered down the scanners, feeling more alive than he had in years. He didn't yet know who his client was, or why they hid behind anonymity. But he knew one thing with certainty: this job would change everything. The second morning began with the hum of power relays warming up across Joran Kale's workshop. He had barely finished reviewing overnight diagnostics when the armored figure arrived, silent, commanding, bringing with them that aura of contained violence. No introductions, no casual greetings. Just purpose. Joran gestured toward a holodisplay, where streams of data scrolled in precise color-coded lines. Your left shoulder actuator is sluggish, only by a fraction, but it lags during high-speed.
Joran arched a brow. Whoever they were, they weren't just trained, they'd fought enough to measure milliseconds in blood. He pulled up neural interface pathways, fingers flicking adjustments across the console. I can reprogram the response curves. Should shave 30% off that lag. Acceptable, the voice replied, but Joran thought he caught a note of appreciation beneath the mechanical filter. Hours bled together as they worked. He ran calibrations, while his client offered tactical feedback that surprised him with its clarity. It wasn't vague battlefield generalities, it was detail only earned through countless battles. How shield harmonics could be tuned to absorb staggered pulse fire. How servo arrays had to respond under simultaneous concussion and plasma impacts. Not theory. Survival. Joran stopped mid-adjustment, studying the armored silhouette. You've spent more time fighting than any soldier I've ever met. And you speak like a commander, not a grunt. The helmet turned toward him, but the reply was measured. Experience shapes requirements. It was evasive, but not a denial. He filed that away. When they moved on to shield systems, Joran found another surprise. Your generators are tuned strictly for defense. But if I adjust the harmonic frequencies, you could redirect bursts outward, short-range EMP-style discharges. Disable enemy weapons inside 10 meters. His client considered this. That would reduce maximum shield strength. True. But with configuration switching, you could toggle modes. Defensive wall one moment, offensive burst the next. Silence lingered, then, proceed. Adaptability is valuable. So he did, weaving his own expertise with their battlefield instincts. It became a rhythm. He suggested engineering tweaks, they responded with combat scenarios, together refining the armor beyond anything its original designers intended. And beneath the mechanical voice, Joran detected flashes of something rare: curiosity. Interest. As though his client enjoyed the collaboration. Later that night, while recalibrating the biomechanical interface, Joran hit a wall. Neural feedback loops refused to stabilize, threatening to overload the wearer's nervous system. After hours of failed attempts, he swore under his breath. This isn't my specialty. I understand the circuits, but not the biology. The armored figure stepped closer. May I? They asked, and for the first time, Joran heard not command, but request. He allowed it. What followed astonished him. The client guided him through intricate recalibrations, suggesting modifications to neural pattern mapping that solved problems he had wrestled with all day. The precision of their insight was uncanny, like someone who had lived inside such systems, not just studied them. "Where did you learn this?" Joran asked finally, unable to contain his admiration. The pause before the reply carried weight. For once, no careful evasion. Just truth, stripped bare. Joran leaned back, watching as the diagnostic readout stabilized beautifully. "You just saved me 2 days of work. You provided the technical framework. Collaboration made success possible." The word struck him. Not praise, not command, partnership. Rare in his line of work, rarer still from someone cloaked in so much secrecy. By the end of the second day, the workshop hummed with progress. Adaptive shielding, faster neural pathways, weapon interfaces more precise than military standards. But the most surprising development wasn't technical, it was the steady shift in how they worked together. From contractor and client to something closer to colleagues. Equals. When Joran finally secured the workshop for the night, he caught himself watching his client retreat into the private quarters he'd arranged. Still faceless, still anonymous. Yet in their measured words and their willingness to share knowledge, he sensed someone more than the armor. Someone who, like him, thrived when problems demanded brilliance. And as Bastion Forge cycled into night, Joran realized this project was no longer just a job. It was a mystery pulling him deeper, into trust, into danger, and perhaps into something he couldn't yet name. On the third day, the workshop felt tense from the start. Joran Kale had been dreading the task that lay ahead, recalibrating the armor's central neural core. Unlike the actuators or the shield harmonics, this procedure required direct access to the systems buried deep within the suit. And that meant one thing: the wearer could not remain inside. He tried everything to avoid that necessity, running simulations and experimenting with bypasses, but the integration was too advanced. Eventually, he set his tools down, exhaling slowly. There was no way around it. When the armored figure arrived, he didn't sugarcoat it. "The neural calibration can't be completed with you inside. We'll need to power the suit down completely. That means, you'll have to step out." For a long, heavy moment, there was only silence. Then the filtered voice replied, calm but tight. "Exposure carries risk." "I know." Joran gestured to the walls. "I can seal this bay tighter than any military facility you've seen. Electromagnetic isolation, data encryption, zero recording. If someone tries to breach us, I can wipe every scrap of information in seconds. You'll be invisible." The figure studied him, or seemed to. Then came a slow nod. "Implement your protocols. I will accept the risk." Joran moved quickly, activating systems he had rarely touched. Lockdowns hissed into place. The workshop became a sealed bubble adrift in the void, cut off from every prying eye. When he was satisfied, he turned. "We're secure. No one can see or hear us now." The armored giant stepped toward the maintenance chamber. Then, almost ceremonially, their voice carried across the room, "Joran Kale, I need your word. What you discover today never leaves this room." Joran met the faceless visor squarely. "You have my word. Absolute confidentiality." Satisfied, the figure entered the chamber. Joran busied himself with consoles, giving them privacy. Through the intercom, he heard their steady voice, beginning power-down sequence. Lights dimmed across the armor's frame. Security locks disengaged in layers, biometric systems falling silent one by one. Joran watched diagnostic feeds cascade into darkness. The suit was no longer an impenetrable shell, it was vulnerable machinery. "Biometric authentication required," his system chirped. Of course, it wouldn't restart without the wearer's direct imprint. "You'll need to interface manually," Joran called. "The mapping won't accept external signals." Minutes passed. Then, at last, the voice returned. But this time, unfiltered. No electronic distortion. Just a clear, natural tone. Initiating authentication sequence. Joran looked up, and froze. Through the chamber's observation window stood a woman, tall and poised, her face unmistakable even across holoscreens and public broadcasts. Elara Valen, Empress of the Valen Dominion. Ruler of 10,000 star systems. One of the most powerful beings in known space. His hands hovered motionless above the console. The anonymous client he had worked beside for 3 days was the very figure whose decisions shaped the destiny of trillions. The realization hit like a collapsing star. Inside the chamber, Elara's movements were steady, almost vulnerable. Without the armor, she seemed smaller, though no less commanding. Fingers danced across the console as her genetic code unlocked the suit's systems. Joran's diagnostics lit up again, calibration sliding into place. But his mind barely registered the numbers. The Empress. Here. Alone. Trusting him. The chamber sealed once more as she stepped back into the armor. Plates folded into place, concealing her identity once again. When the systems fully powered up, the faceless warrior stood before him once more, but Joran could never see her the same way again. All calibrations complete, he reported, forcing his voice steady. Neural pathways synchronized. Systems at peak efficiency. She moved with fluid grace, testing the enhancements, her voice once again filtered. Performance improved as projected. Adaptive shielding functions properly. Response time exceeds expectations. Joran's chest tightened. They were discussing specifications like before, but everything had changed. He wasn't collaborating with an anonymous warrior anymore, he was holding the confidence of a ruler whose enemies spanned the galaxy. He braced himself. Execution. Intimidation. Orders to forget. Instead, her tone shifted. For 3 days, you worked with me as an equal. You challenged my assumptions, contributed your expertise without fear, and treated me not as a throne, but as a person. Do you understand how rare that is? Joran's mouth went dry. Slowly, he said, you wanted to be seen as more than an empress. Exactly. For the first time, the armor's filtered voice carried warmth. Every conversation in my life is shaped by power. By fear. By calculation. But here, you saw me as a professional, and that has value beyond measure. The revelation tumbled in his thoughts. The damage to her armor hadn't come from random conflict. It had been an assassination attempt, he realized. Not from rebels at the fringe, but from factions inside her own empire, those who thought her policies too diplomatic, too conciliatory. She was hunted by her own. Why are you telling me this? Joran asked, his voice rough. Because I trust you. The reply came without hesitation. You have integrity. Skill. And the ability to see truth beneath surface. Trust. From an empress. It was almost unbearable. For the first time, Joran understood the gravity of what had begun 3 days ago. He wasn't just repairing armor. He was standing at the edge of a secret that could tilt the balance of galactic power. Joran Kale didn't sleep that night. The revelation of who his client truly was pressed against his thoughts like the weight of a star. Elara Valen, Empress of the Dominion, had stood unarmored in his workshop, trusting him with a secret that could fracture the galaxy if exposed. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face again, stripped of ceremony, marked not by untouchable power but by quiet resolve. When she returned the next day, armored once more, Joran kept his tone professional. Weapon systems integration is finished. Ammunition compatibility expanded, targeting acquisition improved by 15%. Adaptive shield modes ready for field switching. Impressive, the modulated voice replied. Yet he could hear beneath it the cadence of the woman he'd glimpsed. Empress, warrior, fugitive, one person bound in secrecy. Then, without preamble, she said, Joran Kale, I intend to offer you something beyond this commission. He froze. What kind of offer? The role of Chief Technical Advisor to the Imperial Engineering Corps. Direct access to resources beyond anything you've imagined. Research that could shape entire civilizations. Your skills deserve more than obscurity on a station at the edge of nowhere. The words hung in the workshop like a gravitational pull. Joran stared at the armored silhouette, his heart racing. For 15 years he had carved independence from corporate contracts and military politics. He answered to no one but his own curiosity. To trade that for an empire. The thought was staggering. What would you expect from me? He asked finally. Honesty, Elara replied without hesitation. Technical truth, unfiltered by politics. The same collaboration we've shared here, applied to challenges that stretch across star systems instead of one suit of armor. Her conviction startled him. She wasn't offering wealth, though no doubt it would follow. She was offering purpose. Influence. A chance to shape the very tools of peace and war across a galaxy. Still, doubt gnawed. For 3 days you've shown respect. Genuine partnership. Was that real, or a performance to recruit me? The answer came swiftly. If manipulation was my goal, I would have revealed myself at once and offered you treasures. Instead, I worked with you as an equal because that is how I prefer to operate. Respect was genuine. So was appreciation. He felt the weight of the choice pressing closer. Independence, or a seat within the heart of power. Safety, or risk on a scale few mortals ever touched. But more than that, it was about her. The woman behind the armor, who longed, at least here, for honesty unshaped by titles. Joran inhaled slowly, decision crystallizing. I accept. On one condition. A tilt of the armored head. Name it. When you need something repaired, or when systems fail, let me be the one person who treats you as an engineer, not an empress. Someone who speaks to you as a peer, not a throne. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the filtered voice softened with something like relief. That condition is not only acceptable, it is deeply welcome. They finalized details in the quiet glow of the workshop, and Joran felt the axis of his life tilting. 3 days ago, he had been just another independent engineer. Now he stood on the threshold of history, drawn into the orbit of the most powerful individual alive. And she had chosen him, not for politics or flattery, but for the integrity of his craft. As they prepared to depart, one final question slipped from him. Were the repairs truly necessary, or was this all a test? A laugh came through the filter, low, warm, uncalculated. The repairs were real, Joran Kale. But yes, your evaluation began the moment you accepted without demanding who I was or why I needed so much secrecy. You exceeded expectations. And so, aboard her unmarked vessel, they left Bastion Forge behind. Joran looked back once through the viewport, watching the station's lights dwindle into the void. Ahead lay the Dominion's capital, a future tangled with responsibility and danger. But also, remarkably, with trust. The anonymous warrior who had entered his bay was gone forever. In her place was an empress who had chosen him to stand at her side. For Joran, it felt less like surrendering independence and more like stepping into the work he had always been meant for. The galaxy awaited, and nothing would ever be the same. And just like that, our story comes full circle. Joran Kale, once a solitary engineer tinkering in the shadows of Bastion Forge, now stands as chief technical advisor to Empress Elara Valen herself. In just a matter of days, secrecy turned into revelation, curiosity into trust, and routine into destiny. What began with scorched plating and damaged actuators evolved into something far greater, the collision of two lives, each searching for more than their roles seemed to allow. Elara had lived as an untouchable symbol, trapped by politics and surrounded by enemies hidden even in her own empire. Joran had lived as an outsider, brilliant yet isolated, his talents wasted on small commissions. In finding one another, both discovered a rare honesty, a partnership where power didn't distort truth, where skill and respect spoke louder than titles. The risks ahead are staggering. Joran's independence is gone, his every decision will ripple across the Dominion. The Empress herself remains a target, hunted not just by rivals in the shadows but by ideologies that resist her vision of diplomacy and unity. Together, they will face pressures capable of bending star systems. Yet the story leaves us with hope, that even in a galaxy ruled by politics, betrayal, and endless conflict, one genuine connection can alter the course of civilizations. All it takes is trust, and the courage to step beyond fear. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of sci-fi intrigue, loyalty, and impossible choices, make sure to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and share it with a friend who loves science fiction. Every click helps bring more stories like this to life, and I promise, there are many more adventures waiting just beyond the next star.